The Schneider CA-1 holds the distinction of being France's first operational tank, marking the nation's entry into armored warfare during World War I. Developed in response to the brutal stalemate of trench warfare, the Schneider CA-1 was designed to break through barbed wire, suppress enemy machine guns, and support advancing infantry. Development began in 1915, heavily influenced by early British tank experiments. However, unlike British designs that emphasized all-around trench crossing, French engineers prioritized direct infantry support. This led to a tank that functioned more like a mobile artillery platform than a breakthrough vehicle. The Schneider CA-1 weighed approximately 13.5 tons and was powered by a 60-horsepower gasoline engine. Its top speed was barely 8 kilometers per h, but speed was never its purpose. Instead, it carried a 75 Blockhouse Schneider cannon, mounted offset in the front hull, supported by 2 machine guns for close defense. Armor thickness ranged from 11 offering protection against small arms, but leaving the vehicle vulnerable to artillery and direct hits. A major weakness was its overhanging nose, which caused frequent trench-crossing failures. Many Schneiders became stuck or immobilized during combat. The Schneider CA-1 made its combat debut in April 1917. During the Nivelle offensive, the result was disastrous. Poor coordination, mechanical failures, and German artillery fire destroyed or disabled a large number of tanks before they even reached enemy lines. Fuel tanks mounted externally made them especially vulnerable to fire. Despite these failures, the Schneider CA-1 was an invaluable learning experience. It demonstrated both the potential and limitations of early tank warfare. Lessons learned from its shortcomings directly influenced future French designs. By late 1918, the Schneider CA-1 was gradually withdrawn from frontline service, replaced by more capable tanks. Still, its historical importance remains immense. It laid the foundation for French armored doctrine and proved that tanks, even flawed ones, could change the battlefield. The Saint-Chamond tank was one of the most ambitious and controversial French tank designs of World War I. Conceived as a heavy assault tank, it was intended to dominate the battlefield with firepower rather than mobility. Weighing over 23 tons, the Saint-Chamond was significantly larger than the Schneider CA-1. It featured a full-length hull and was armed with a powerful 75 field gun, capable of engaging enemy fortifications at long range. However, its size came at a cost. The tank's long body extended far beyond its tracks, making trench crossing extremely difficult. In the muddy, cratered battlefields of the Western Front, this design flaw proved devastating. Powered by a petrol-electric transmission system, the Saint-Chamond was technologically advanced for its time, but also unreliable. Electrical failures were common, and field repairs were extremely difficult under combat conditions. The tank first saw action in May 1917, often alongside Schneider units. While its gun was effective when it could fire, many Saint-Chamonds became immobilized before reaching enemy lines. German artillery crews quickly learned to target these large, slow-moving vehicles. Despite its problems, later versions improved track length and armor protection. Crews also adapted tactics, using the tank as mobile artillery support rather than a breakthrough vehicle. By 1918, the Saint-Chamond was increasingly overshadowed by lighter, more mobile tanks. Still, it represented an important step in French experimentation with heavy armored firepower. The Renault FT is widely regarded as the most important tank of World War I and the blueprint for modern tank design. Unlike earlier tanks, the FT introduced a revolutionary layout that is still used today. Weighing just 6.5 tons, the Renault FT was small, agile, and easy to mass-produce. Its most groundbreaking feature was the fully rotating turret, allowing the tank to engage threats in any direction without repositioning the hull. The crew consisted of just 2 men, a driver and a commander gunner, making coordination difficult but efficient. The tank was armed either with a 37 Puteaux cannon or a Hotchkiss machine gun, depending on the variant. Powered by a 39-horsepower engine, the Renault FT could reach speeds of 7 kilometers per h, which was acceptable for infantry support operations. Its light weight allowed it to cross trenches more effectively than heavier tanks. First deployed in 1918, the Renault FT proved devastating when used in large numbers. French commanders finally embraced massed armored tactics, overwhelming German defenses through coordination and mobility. The success of the Renault FT extended far beyond World War I. It was exported worldwide and influenced tank designs in nearly every major military power. The Renault FT TSF was not designed to fight. It was designed to command. As tank warfare evolved rapidly in 1917 and 1918, the French army faced a major problem: communication. Battlefield commanders struggled to coordinate tank units once combat began, especially when smoke, artillery fire, and terrain made visual signals impossible. The solution was the Renault FT TSF, a command and communication variant of the famous Renault FT. Instead of a rotating turret, the TSF featured a fixed armored superstructure that housed early wireless radio equipment. TSF stands for Télégraphie sans fil, meaning wireless telegraphy. This version retained the same chassis, engine, and mobility as the standard Renault FT. It weighed slightly more due to the radio equipment, but remained agile compared to heavier tanks of the era. The crew usually consisted of 2 to 3 operators, responsible for driving, radio transmission, and battlefield coordination. The TSF was used behind the front lines or slightly forward, allowing commanders to relay orders to advancing tank units. Although primitive by modern standards, these radios represented a revolution in armored command and control. The Renault FT TSF did not fire weapons, but its impact was strategic rather than destructive. It allowed French forces to coordinate mass tank assaults more effectively during the final offensives of 1918. This concept, dedicated command tanks, would later become standard in armored warfare across the world. The Renault FT mitrailleuse was the most common combat version of France's revolutionary light tank. While some FT tanks carried cannons, the majority were armed with a Hotchkiss 8mm machine gun optimized for suppressing infantry and machine gun nests. The decision to field large numbers of machine gun-armed tanks was tactical. World War I battlefields were dominated by entrenched infantry, and rapid-fire weapons were often more effective than heavier guns in close combat. The rotating turret allowed the gunner to cover 360 degrees, making the Renault FT exceptionally versatile. Crews could engage enemy soldiers in trenches, advancing infantry or defensive strongpoints without turning the entire vehicle. Light armor protected the crew from rifle fire and shrapnel, while the tank's small size made it harder to hit than larger vehicles like the Schneider or Saint-Chamond. During the final year of the war, Renault FT mitrailleuse tanks were deployed in large swarms, overwhelming German positions through numbers and coordination. This tactic marked the birth of modern armored formations. The machine gun variant proved so effective that many nations copied the concept, influencing tank design well into the interwar period. The Renault FT cannon variant was designed to give French tank units direct firepower against enemy fortifications and machine gun nests. Armed with the 37mm Puteaux SA-18 cannon, this version complemented the machine gun-equipped tanks. The cannon had limited armor-piercing capability but was highly effective against bunkers, barbed wire defenses, and enemy infantry positions. Its compact size allowed it to fit perfectly into the FT's rotating turret. This variant played a crucial role in combined tank tactics, where machine gun tanks suppressed infantry while cannon tanks destroyed hardened targets. The lightweight design meant the Renault FT cannon could move easily across damaged terrain, cross trenches more effectively than heavier tanks, and be transported efficiently. By late 1918, the Renault FT cannon had proven that light tanks with proper coordination could outperform heavier, slower vehicles. This lesson reshaped armored warfare forever. The influence of this design extended far beyond World War I, shaping tank development for decades. As French armored units expanded rapidly in 1918, battlefield communication remained one of the greatest challenges. Radios were scarce, unreliable, and often limited to command tanks. To solve this problem, the French army introduced signal and liaison variants of the Renault FT. These tanks were equipped with signal flags, panels, and visual markers instead of heavy weaponry. Some retained a light machine gun for self-defense, while others were completely unarmed. Their primary role was to act as mobile messengers between infantry, artillery, and tank formations. On the chaotic World War I battlefield, filled with smoke, shell craters, and constant artillery fire, Visual communication was often the only reliable method. Signal tanks would move forward, relay orders, mark objectives, or indicate friendly positions to artillery observers. Because they used the same chassis as the standard Renault FT, these tanks had excellent mobility and could keep pace with advancing forces. Their small size made them less noticeable targets, increasing their survivability. Though rarely mentioned in popular histories, Renault FT signal tanks played a crucial role in ensuring coordination during France's final offensives. They represented an early step toward modern battlefield command systems. Before tanks could change the battlefield, soldiers had to learn how to operate them. The Renault FT training tank was developed specifically for instruction, crew training, and mechanical familiarization. These vehicles were often identical in appearance to combat versions but lacked live ammunition or had modified weapon systems. Some featured dual controls, allowing instructors to supervise drivers directly. Training tanks were used extensively in French armored schools, where crews learned navigation, coordination, maintenance, and emergency procedures. Given the mechanical unreliability of early tanks, maintenance training was just as important as combat skills. The Renault FT's simplicity made it ideal for mass training programs. Thousands of French tankers were trained using these vehicles, allowing France to deploy large, coordinated armored units by 1918. While training tanks never fired a shot in anger, their contribution was strategic. Well-trained crews meant fewer breakdowns, better coordination, and higher battlefield effectiveness. Early tanks frequently broke down, became stuck in mud, or were damaged by enemy fire. To keep armored units operational, the French army adapted some Renault FT tanks into recovery and maintenance vehicles. These tanks were fitted with tools, tow cables, winches, and spare parts, allowing them to assist disabled vehicles directly on the battlefield. Some had their turrets removed entirely to make room for equipment. Operating under fire, recovery crews risked their lives to retrieve damaged tanks or repair them in forward positions. Without these vehicles, many tanks would have been permanently lost. The recovery Renault FT played a vital logistical role, ensuring that damaged tanks could be repaired and returned to service quickly. This increased operational readiness during critical offensives. This concept, dedicated armored recovery vehicles, would later become a standard feature of mechanized armies worldwide. The Schneider CA2 was an experimental evolution of France's first tank, created to address the many weaknesses exposed during combat in 1917. After the disappointing battlefield performance of the Schneider CA1, French engineers sought a more capable and survivable design. The CA2 prototype featured improved armor layout, a redesigned hull, and better internal crew arrangement. Engineers attempted to reduce the vulnerable overhanging nose that caused trench crossing failures in the CA1. Although it retained a similar role, infantry support with a forward-mounted gun, the CA2 incorporated lessons learned from frontline crews. Better protection against machine gun fire and shrapnel was a key priority. Despite these improvements, the rapid success of the Renault FT shifted French doctrine toward lighter, more mobile tanks. As a result, the Schneider CA2 never entered mass production. While it never saw combat, the CA2 represents a critical transitional step between early, flawed tank concepts and more refined armored designs. It stands as a reminder that experimentation, even failed experimentation, was essential to the evolution of armored warfare. The FCM-1A was France's bold attempt to create a true breakthrough heavy tank during World War I. Developed by Forges at Chantier de la Méditerranée, this prototype reflected a growing belief that future tanks needed both heavy armor and powerful weapons. The FCM-1A was significantly larger than existing French tanks and featured a rotating turret armed with a 105 mm gun, an unprecedented concept at the time. Thick armor was designed to resist artillery fragments and direct fire. Unlike earlier French tanks, the FCM-1A emphasized balanced design, combining firepower, armor, and mobility more effectively. Extended tracks improved trench crossing ability, addressing one of the biggest problems faced by earlier tanks. Although the prototype performed well in trials, it was expensive, complex, and slow to produce. As the war neared its end, French leadership prioritized faster-to-build light tanks like the Renault FT. The FCM-1A never entered combat, but its design philosophy directly influenced later heavy tanks. It proved that heavily armored vehicles could still be practical on the battlefield. The Char 2C represents the final and most extreme expression of World War I tank design philosophy. Conceived in 1917 during the height of trench warfare, it was designed to smash through enemy lines using sheer size and firepower. Although completed after the war, the Char 2C was entirely shaped by World War I battlefield thinking. It weighed over 69 tons, making it the largest operational tank in the world for many years. Armed with a 75 mm cannon and a fully rotating turret, along with multiple machine guns, the Char 2C required a large crew to operate effectively. Its armor was thick by WWI standards, offering excellent protection against infantry weapons. However, the end of the war rendered its original purpose obsolete. Maneuver warfare replaced trench stalemates, and such massive tanks became impractical. Even so, the Char 2C remains historically important. It demonstrated the ultimate limits of early tank design and highlighted the shift away from super-heavy vehicles toward more balanced armored forces.